Okay, welcome back, everybody. In this series, I always have a dilemma. Do I talk about prakim we've studied already or ones you're going to be studying? So I try to find a balance between them. So I want to finish up something which we didn't do last week. We were doing the Gedalia stories. It's assassination and the people telling Yirmiyahu anything you say will listen to you, and then they don't listen to him. And his biggest supporters, uh, Yonatan ben Kereach, was smart enough to listen to Yirmiyahu, and he ran away from the city before the destruction. He came back with Gedalia, and he supported Gedalia and Yirmiyahu. If there's anyone who listened to Yirmiyahu, it's Yonatan ben Kereach. And he and his group, after all these events, they asked him about going down to going down to Egypt or staying in Israel, and they still don't listen to him, which was like so sad. That's where we ended last week's share, where they say, where they tell Yirmiyahu anything you say will listen to you. Yirmiyahu tells them God says stay in Israel, and they don't listen. They go down to Egypt. Now, in Egypt, there's one more nevuah which we didn't read, which puts, I think, the icing on the cake. I don't think we did it, did we? Did we talk about the sermons he gives in Egypt itself? I'm pretty sure we didn't. So I'm going to start the share
Believe so.
there. Here, it's so sad, Yirmiyahu. Let me do the what's up? Here we go. Don't want my inbox. We want Jeremiah, chapter 40. I'll open up a different one. I'm going to open up Hebrew one. Okay, move you guys to the side. And in this last historical devote of Yirmiyahu, he finally goes down to Egypt, probably in chapter 44, I'm assuming. I'll try 44. It's not good. 40, no. Okay. Here. Okay. The word of God to Yirmiyahu when he's down in Egypt, in Migdal Tachampes. Okay. You saw everything that happened. And here. Now, here's the whole speech. Okay. Okay. So listen what they say. Yirmiyahu gives this whole big speech in Bavel. Okay. So Yirmiyahu gives this whole big speech to them about here what happened. Here. He gives his whole speech. Let's just review from the beginning. This is the word of Yirmiyahu to the Jews in Egypt, in Migdol and Tachpes. There's the ones who went down to Egypt. You know what? I'm going to do this English Hebrew better. It'll be easier to read. Chapter 40. I open up here. Just go to 44. Oh, what's wrong with my computer today? Okay, chapter 44. Okay, this was word of, my gosh, okay. This is the word of God to Yirmiyahu, to the Yehudim in Bavel, and make it bigger. Here we go. Okay. You said you saw all the things that happened. You should have learned your lesson by now, listening to me. All my predictions came true. All because of your bad deeds, etc. And I sent all my prophets to warn you, didn't listen. You got angry, and therefore, why are you doing these bad acts in Egypt? You're going to lose any future. Why are you serving other gods in Egypt? They come down to Egypt, they start assimilating, they follow other gods. Okay? You're only there, like Ashur, they do Gam Lagosha, I'm only temporary there. Okay? And if you follow these other gods, you'll be finished. Okay? He said, did you forget all the bad things that happened to your ancestors in Egypt? Basically, he's telling them, now you're following other gods. After all my predictions came true, you saw what happened to people who don't listen to God. And you come to Egypt and you follow other gods? Don't you have any common sense? Okay. So basically, he can't stop giving his drashot to the people. Now that they're not in Israel anymore, listen how the people talk to him back. This is like the saddest, mixed everything else nothing. Okay. He gives his whole bag, thing what's going to happen to him if they don't listen to him. Okay. Pasuk Tedvav. The men answered Yirmiyahu, the ones who knew that their wives were following these other gods, and all the women, okay, there who were serving these other gods, and all the people living in the land in Egypt, etc. Here's the answer they give to Yirmiyahu. They have what's called no shame, no busha. Hadavar asher dibarta elenu b'shem Hashem einenu shomim elecha. Rabbi, we're not listening to you. Total chutzpah. Usually excuses. He says, Rabbi, we're not listening to you. And listen how they give the reason. Ki asona said, Kol adavar she'yatza mipinu. We're going to follow all these other gods. We're going to go out of our way to serve all these gods of the heavens and give them libations, etc. Right? Just like our ancestors did in Yehuda, okay? Okay? And we're going to be wealthy, we'll have food, and things will be good and nothing, and we won't see bad. He's saying, we're going to do the same things our ancestors did in the time of Menachem. Listen to what they're saying. They're going on the whole, remember that we started the whole show with the Rishis Michat Golotenu, the beginning of Yoshiahu's career, Yoshiahu's reform. And when you compare the time period of Menachem, when we left God, remember in time of Menachem we were so bad and God brought all this evil upon us. But before all the evil came, during Menache's reign, things were good compared to the way they are now. There was when people started returning. He's saying life was better before Yoshiahu's reform. Because when we were serving other gods under Menachem, relatively speaking, life was good. Now that we've been listening to you guys, you in all reform, we've only had disaster. Who needs it? So Rabbi, don't tell us what to do. He says, we're not going to listen to you. And things are better when we serve other gods. Okay? Listen. Since we stopped following idol worship. Remember in the time of Menachem, they were doing all this idol worship and God said, I'm going to bring the Korban. Yes. From the time we stopped serving these other gods and serving them Nesachim, okay? Everything's lost. And we just been destroyed by sword and by famine. Okay? We're going to tafka, like lahachis. We're going to serve these other gods and give them libations, etc. Okay? And we're not going to listen to you. Okay? And then Yirmiyahu tells them, if you do this, you'll be finished. Okay? And God will what do you call it? God's going to wipe you out afterwards. And then therefore, you said them call Hashem you said you're going to do it. God's going to therefore listen to the word of God. You people living in Egypt. No Jews we left in Egypt. Okay, I'm going to punish you. Nothing will come out of you. You guys are finished. Okay, and maybe a couple remnants of the sword will return from Eretz Mitzrayim. Okay, small number. So the people back in Israel will know how bad things were. And this is your sign. And he gives, what do you call it? He gives them a whole sign, what it'll be. Then he talks about what's going to happen to Paro Chofra without going to the history. Okay? Okay, but just like Tzidkiah was taken by the Babylonians, Paro, your leader in Egypt, is going to be taken by the Babylonians. That leads us right into the Nebuot of the other nations in the end of the book. So in a nutshell, 1 second, close the door. In a nutshell, Yirmiyahu's career ends with like the worst anything could dream of for a rabbi. He gives his drashot, and now we don't listen to him. In his face, they tell him, Dafka, we're going to do. And from a historical perspective, they have a point. You see what they're saying? Is we thought, compared to the way things were in time of Menachem, compared to the way they are now, everything's destroyed. What did this reform do? What good did it? What did this Reshis Michat Galotenu? What did this? It's just a disaster now. And Jewish life is better when we're following other gods. And they have a point. That's the problem. Everything begins on your narrative and your perspective, where you start your story from. Now, the truth is, if you know your history, the Egyptian community, the Jewish community in Egypt prospered during Beit Sheni a little bit, but then it was all destroyed. There was some member under Talmai and under the Turgum HaShebim. There was a big Jewish community in Egypt, but there was like mass massacres later on. I think Malka Simkowitz has a whole series on it. She's the historian, talks about that time period a lot. That's her expertise. Like the Second Temple period in Egypt. There's a lot of Jewish literature from the time, and there was big communities, but Basov they were all destroyed. Now back to we want to finish up Yirmiyahu. After this in Yirmiyahu, let me open up the share again. Just open up a regular Tanakh now. That was 44. 45, the 44 ends Yirmiyahu, but the Nevuot to the people. 45 is a small little Nevuah to Baruch, his scribe, and saying, he was hoping that maybe things would go good when he sent that letter in the 4th year of Yehoiakim. Remember, in the 4th year of Yehoiakim, Baruch writes a letter and reads it in the Beit HaMikdash, And basically, God tells Yirmiyahu, don't get your hopes up too high for the future. You'll survive this, but don't expect things to be great. It's like a nice little closure of this whole section. And then chapter 46 starts the Nevuot on the nations, which we'll talk about soon. So this is the word of God to Yirmiyahu on the nations. He starts with Egypt. We have a whole chapter about Egypt. And then another chapter about Egypt in 47. Okay. Oh, no, then after Egypt is 46. 47 is on Plishtim. And then 48 is going to be on Moab. And then we're going to get, after Moab is going to be, it's still Moab. Yeah, we have a whole chapter on Moab. You'll see why he's so angry with Moab later. And then Bnei Ammon, all of our neighbors. So we had Egypt, we had Ammon and Moab, all the people that we were hoping would be with us. And then finally, he's going to give it to the Babylonians. What's going to happen to Eretz Kasdim? Okay. And what's going to happen to them? And they'll get their punishment. And Moab, and he continues on Bavel to the end. In Egypt, he can say things about Bavel because Bavel's not going to catch him anymore. And then the last chapter is the end of Sefer Melachim, just pretty much repeated, and the story of the Churban again. Why it sort of gives a closure to the book. We're talking about the story of thing, but it ends just like Sefer Melachim ends with Yoachin coming out of exile and getting better treatment. But basically, it's the same chapter as the end of Sefer Melachim. Now, one technical thing about this part in Yirmiyahu, I want to talk about the Nevuot about the other nations when we see them in Yechezkel, because there'll be a whole section in Yechezkel about other nations, and then we'll compare them. But as far as how the book is organized, one of the key points I was trying to make is that our Yirmiyahu is redacted, meaning there's lots of chapters, Nevuot of Yirmiyahu, written in different time periods, some without timestamps, some without. I tried to identify the Megillat Sefer, which I claimed was not flammable, means it wasn't seditious to the king, and therefore it was able to be published. That was the first 20 chapters. I mean, up till chapter 19 and 20 is a closure. And then we had all the political, that was chapters 21 through 29, remember? Then we have Nevuot Nachama, which actually we never got to, but they're famous. Things will get better. And then we have the books, the stories about how the book came about, chapters 35 and 36, from the 4th year of Yoakim, when they burnt the king's books. Then we had the history appendix, and then we have one second. For me, I gotta undo the spotlight. 1 second. My view got it. Okay. And then we had the vote on the Amim at the end. So that's the way we have the book organized. If you go to the library or look at the Septuagint, or if you're in a hotel room and you happen to have an Old Testament next to the New Testament, sometimes you give a free one in the drawer. I don't know if you'll look at them. They still have that custom in hotels. So if you look at the version of the Old Testament that comes with the New Testament, which follows the Christian custom, so they have the book of Yirmiyahu, but the chapter order is different, and some of the Dead Sea Scrolls follow this also. It's not a problem of fear. It's simply there's a different logic to organizing the book. Now, what they have, I'll show you. Let me share my screen. It's like really interesting. But it shows you, it just proves to you the book is redacted, which supports my whole proof that I can organize the chapters in many ways. Our version, I think, makes a lot of sense. But another option also makes sense. I'll show you that version. Let me share my screen and open up my. So here we go. That's the Yechezkel. We need that next here. Yirmiyahu here. What we saw in Yirmiyahu was chapters 1 was the Hakdasha, being appointed. Chapters through 10 were the first original Megillat Sefer, and then added chapters 11 through 20, with chapter 20 being the ending. Then the rebuke of the leaders in what's called the flammable section, 21 to 29. The note of Nechama was 30 through 34, and then how the book came about was 34 and 35. The story of destruction, and then the vote for the nations. Basically that's the Mivnev Yirmiyahu. Now, in the Septuagint, here's the order. After 25, so in other words, our chapter 25 in Yirmiyahu is followed in Septuagint with our chapter 46, followed by our chapter 50, followed by our chapter 51, by 47. In other words, All these nevuot are nevuot of the Amim. And then it was basically in the Septuagint, they take chapter 25 and cut it in half. The first half is the first half of chapter 25. Afterwards, after halfway through 25, we do all the nevuot of the nations, and then we finish chapter 25. So therefore, our chapter 46 is going to be in the Septuagint chapter 26. Got it? Our chapter 50 will be 27. It's a different organization of the same material. It's the same nevuot, basically the same content, but organized differently. And the reason why is very simple. So I'm going to go back to chapter 25 and see why that happened. Okay, we'll stop this share and read chapter 25 here. Yeah, chapter 25. We have as follows. Remember, in the 4th year of Yehoiakim, God gives Yirmiyahu this nevuah. I'll make it bigger. No, that doesn't help. This goes this way. God gives Yirmiyahu the following nevuah. And close up this and make sure I can read it. Okay, these guys go top. Now, I've been warning you, remember, in chapter, I've been warning you for the last 23 years, from the 13th year of Yehoiakim until the 4th year from the 13th year of Yoshiel to the 4th year of Yehoiakim. I've been warning you, you haven't listened. And I've been warning you, and now here comes your punishment. לכן כל Hashem, יען לא שמעתם את דבריי, הנה שולח לקחת את כל משפט צפון, I'm sending Nebuchadnezzar, my servant, I'm sending him to punish you, and not only on you and all the nations around, and for the next 7 years the Babylonians are in charge. After 70 years are over, I'm going to punish the Babylonians for what they did wrong. That's why the Nevuot Amim is in the end of Yirmiyahu as an appendix. Now, and why? Because what they did, and then when I'm finished using Babel to punish other nations, I'll punish Babel for what they're doing wrong. Now, then God tells Yirmiyahu to do as follows: Kol Mar Hashem Yisrael, take this cup of wine, take a cup of wine that I'm giving you, and make all these kings and all these nations drink this cup of wine, and tell them drink it, no matter what they want. I take the cup and I make all these nations drink this cup of wine. And here's a list of nations. Yirmiyahu has to go around like Sheva Brachas, giving the cups to different kings. Who are they? Give the cup to Yerushalayim, the cities of Yehudah, its kings, its officers, etc. Okay. Give it to Paro to drink, he and his servants and all of his ministers, etc. Give it to the Arabia, wherever that is, probably near Saudi Arabia, the land of Oz or Eretz Utz. Okay. That's where Eob's from. The land of Plishtim, Ashkelon, Aza, Ekron, Sherit Ashdod, all of our neighbors, Edom, Moab, Bnei Ammon, the king of Tzor, Sidon, basically the whole Middle East. It goes on, all these different countries. He says, take this cup of wine. Basically, the whole civilized world was going to be conquered by Babel. Take this wine and tell them what? Kol Mar Hashem Tzvot Yisrael, shtu v'shichru kiu v'niflu. This is good for Purim. It's basically drink, get drunk, throw up, fall on your face. You won't recover because of this sword that's coming from Babel. Okay? And if you don't want to take it, that's tough. Take it, drink it no matter what. Now, in other words, this is, I don't think Yirmiyahu went around with a cup of wine giving all these nations to drink. This is all symbolic. But he's telling the Jewish people that don't think you're the only one being punished. I'm sending Babel to punish everybody. And he gives us Kal V'chomer. Pasuk Chavtet. Kinei ba'ir asher nikra shmi alel, the city that's associated with my name, I'm sending Babel to punish. Anochi mechel hara, I'm going to begin to punish. But tem, you other nations, tinake, tinaku, lo tinaku, ki cherv ani korea kol yoshvei haaretz b'shem Hashem tzvot. If I'm going to punish my own people, Kal V'chomer, I'll punish the other people as well. Now, why those nations are being punished, basically in Yirmiyahu, on the other nations, is what they're doing wrong. Yirmiyahu is saying God's sending Babel to punish all the nations who have sinned, and then he goes through and explains what's so evil about all the nations, how bad their behavior is. Yechezkel is going to give a set of devote about other nations, and they'll be punished for a different reason, we'll see. But this is where he says all these nations have to drink. At this point in Yirmiyahu, we continue with what's happening, but in the Septuagint, right over here, after he sends his cup, here's where we insert the Nevuot Amim. Hope it makes sense now. It makes sense to put Nevuot Amim here, pretty much following the order that he says, and it makes sense to put it in an appendix at the end. So if you want to understand the reason why the book's out of order in the Septuagint or in in other versions of the Bible. So basically, because in chapter 25 he's sending Bavel to punish all the nations, we follow that with all the nevuot about the other nations. In our book, we just finish Am Yisrael's part and we leave the other nations for the end. It just shows you the book is redacted and there's logic to doing it in different orders. And that was this little technical thing. The rest of this year, we have to talk about Yechezkel because we're starting to think Yechezkel in a day or two. We'll be getting up to Yechezkel. Now, my whole point is you can't understand Yechezkel without Yirmiyahu. Let me turn off my screen, and I'll share a couple questions to see if anyone's awake. If I'm not mistaken, we didn't do Yechezkel at all yet, did we? We didn't talk about it. Now, most people have heard of Yechezkel the prophet, but very few people read the whole book. You'll be one of the few, hopefully, in this program doing it. But it's a hard book to understand. But those who haven't read the book or studied the book, there's certain chapters in Yechezkel everyone knows about. Tell me the famous ones. What's Yechezkel known for?
Mostly Merkava.
Yeah.
Visions.
How come everyone knows Yechezkel's Ma'aseh Merkava?
To have Torah.
For Shavuos morning. So we might be half asleep, but everyone knows it, and everyone knows you're not supposed to learn it. Remember, because it's too, you don't teach it. And people are machmir not only not to study the first parak of Yechezkel. Some people machmir don't study any Yechezkel, you might study the first parak. And some people more machmir won't study any Nevi'im because they might come to study Yechezkel. And to be more machmir, they won't study any Tanakh at all because they might open up Nevi'im.
No, you're being funny.
Okay,
No,
okay.
I just remember Yechezkel lying on his side for a
Yeah.
year and a half and not showering.
That's right.
And also he was pulled by tzitziot of his hair today.
That's right. And you have Ezekiel bread. You ever seen that in the bakery?
No.
The 7-grain Ezekiel bread.
Yes.
Because he's eating
Oh,
he's lying on his side. He does the craziest things. On top of that, he has X-rated nevuot. Another reason not to study the book for teenagers. We mumble some psukim from Yechezkel at the Seder. Luckily, kids don't understand. Remember the Drash of Armiya Veravi with about an abandoned baby and how he left God and was an unfaithful wife. So there's a lot of it's super X-rated. A lot of his nevuot, and really, really harsh. And the question is going to be, what else is Yechezkel known for? Another famous nevuah.
you do the third Beis Hamikdash.
How come he said third?
It was
Yechezkel doesn't say third.
maybe. Okay, the second.
He doesn't say
Also,
second. He says the
the
next.
Karbonos a little messed up.
Yeah. He says the next best Beit HaMikdash. He talks about a future temple. Yeah. Because it didn't happen in the second, we call it the third. When it will happen the third, maybe we'll call it the fourth.
Whatever.
But
Yeah.
when we get that part of Yechezkel, we'll give a whole different take on it. No, why he's talking about rebuilding the temple and when he talks about it. But he's known for his temple. And there's one other famous one that almost everybody knows from Yechezkel.
Dry bones.
Exactly. Why does everyone know dry bones? A, because of the Jerusalem Post.
Because
yeah. But and
Also,
also people because
Haftorah.
it talks about Tchiyat HaMetim.
it's a Haftorah that every biyachad in that prayer.
Yeah, it's in Cholamoid. When is it? In Sukkot? We read it?
No, Hanukkah time. Vayigash.
No. Vayigash
Vayigash
Vayigash are the two trees, grafting the two trees.
Right, and they
It's the second part of the parak. The first half is either Sukkot or Pesach. Or Chag HaMatzot, one of those two. Either way, those are the famous ones. Now, I want to explain why it's not by chance those are the famous ones, and we'll see where they're coming from. And hopefully they will understand why they're there. I want to begin with my Semer Kava, and there's a famous midrash that what Yechezkel ben Buzi saw, which was awesome, was nothing compared to what a shifcha layam, what a maidservant saw at the crossing of the Red Sea. Anyone remember hearing that midrash? Good. It was Yetziat Mitzrayim was so awesome, was so amazing that even a simple maidservant who was crossing the Red Sea had a greater vision of God than Yechezkel had. And Yechezkel has the greatest vision of God of any prophet, pretty much. Most definitely the most detailed. Which is a beautiful midrash, but I want to claim it's not pshat for a very simple reason. Because Yechezkel doesn't see God. What does he see?
The Merkava,
And what's a Merkava?
the Malachim,
No, a Merkava is a chariot.
Chariot. The throne.
As we know from our society, you judge people by their cars. God has a car in the garage. Used to be sitting there. But what Yechezkel sees is not God, but he sees God in his car. We see God's car leaving the garage or leaving Jerusalem, not going up to heaven, brother. He sees God leaving Jerusalem and landing where? On the river Kfar.
In Tel Aviv. In Tel Aviv. He goes
But
to Tel
in
Aviv.
Bavel. The main thing is in Bavel.
Bavel.
On Nahar Kfar. And Nahar Kfar, that's a great name for a river, isn't it? Because what's Kfar? Kfar is Rechev backwards, and also Kruv. He's Kruvim, Al Kfar. It's beautiful wordplay.
Oh.
Now, what's so important about that vision? That vision is not amazing. We're not being told how awesome Yechezkel was. There's something fundamental, basic to that vision, which is the key to the book. Now, anyone remember what year Yechezkel began his nevuah? Hopefully you don't.
Fifth.
Okay. Now, if we didn't see that, when would you expect him to begin his nevuah? Give me some logical times. If Yechezkel is going to be the prophet for the Jews who went into exile, remember, Yechezkel goes with Galut Yehoyachin, 11 years before the Churban. When would you expect him to start talking?
As soon as he goes in the Galut.
In the first year, either when he arrives in Bavel, start talking to people, or right before the Churban. But why year 5? That's what we want to discuss today. Why does Yechezkel Nevuah begin in year 5? So let's take a look at something which I think is amazing. If we make a quick, let me just first show you Yechezkel inside. Here, Yechezkel chapter 1, just the first line. Okay. First of all, the year begins in year 30. Now, it's not 30 CE, BCE, AD, whatever it is. It says year 30, stam, but no mention what it's relating to. But year 30 of the book of Yechezkel is in the 4th month, the 5th day of the 4th month in the Golah. He sees the heavens open up, and I see this vision. This godly vision. That question is Marot Elohim means a powerful vision, or remember Elohim can be powerful. Is it a vision of God or a powerful vision? Remember Ruach Elohim, that word a lot. On the 5th of the month, and then in the 5th year of Galut Yehoyachin. That was Yechezkel begins his opening prophecy in year 5 of Galut Yehoyachin, which is year 5 of Tzidkiel. Okay, and he sees this vision. God takes him, and he sees this strong wind, Ruach Sarah, okay, from the north, Anan Gadol, just like Har Sinai, etc. This fiery vision, and then 4 different faces, etc. And then the pasuk that gives us our bad back problems. When you daven Shmoneh Esrei, remember, there's 4 faces, but their feet are straight. Everyone know that's our custom to have our feet together in Shmoneh Esrei is because of this pasuk. Okay? And the bottom of the feet look like the regel of an egel, which explains probably the reason for chet. Why? Remember, Aaron, Nadav, and Avihu, and 70 elders saw the bottom of God's feet, and then they make this vision of God later on that looks like an egel. A lot of Parshim explain, especially Chizkuni, that's why Aaron makes the egel. That was his vision, what he saw, what God looked like. Good. And then, without going to all the details, this crazy vision of God's Merkava, of God's chariot. But the main thing are the ofanim. The chayot are moving back and forth, and then there's an ofan. That's a wheel by the chayot, and then there's ofanim. There's wheels, and the wheels are moving, and finally moving in all directions, and finally at the end, it all lands in Bavel. Now, what we have to figure out is what's happening in year 5 of Galut Yehoyachin, which is year 5 of Tzidkiel. Right? What's happening in Yerushalayim at that time? Now, if you remember what we did in Yirmiyahu, I'm sorry, 1 second. Let me show you one other thing. Let me stop this here. Okay. If you remember, just a quick review of the events in Yirmiyahu. God warns the people. We saw it back in chapter 25. I'm saying the Babylonians to take over. Yoakim doesn't buy it. He rebels against the Babylonians. Nebuchadnezzar himself comes to Yerushalayim, takes over the city. Yoakim dies. Yoachin, his son, takes over for 3 months, and he listens to Yirmiyahu, puts up a white flag, and goes in an organized surrender, goes out to Babylon. The Babylonians don't destroy the city. They don't destroy the temple. Instead, they appoint a vassal king, Tzidkiel. Remember, they changed his name to Tzidkiel, probably with Yirmiyahu's guidance. And as long as had we been subservient to Bavel, Jerusalem didn't have to be destroyed. We could have saved the temple. And the future of the Jewish people would have been from Yerushalayim. Whoever went to Babel, fine. Maybe they'll come back later. But Jerusalem could have remained had we only stayed loyal to Babel. But we rebelled against Babel, and that's why they put the siege on the city. We talked about the rebellion last weekend in the story of the Khurban with the Gedaliah story. Now, when did the rebellion begin? If we go back to chapter 27 in Yirmiyahu, we see the beginning of the rebellion. If I go back to Yirmiyahu chapter 27, up. Okay, Yirmiyahu chapter 27. God tells Yirmiyahu to make that yoke, and he sends the yoke, which is similar, put yourself in a yoke. He send this yoke to Melech Edom and Melech Moab and Melech Bnei Ammon, Melech Sor, etc. All the same kings he's going to give the vote to later on, and tell them, this is the word of God. I made the heavens and earth, and now I'm giving all these lands to Nebuchadnezzar. Serve him, and basically, if you accept Babylonian rule, you can stay in your land, and if you don't accept Babylon, then any nation doesn't put his neck under Bavel. If you put your neck under Bavel, you can remain. If not, you're finished. And he tells Tzidkiel, put yourself under the yoke of Melech Bavel and serve him. Why should you die? Because that's what can happen to anybody who doesn't listen to Bavel, as we said before. Don't listen to your false prophets. They're leading you astray. They're saying things my name I never said. I didn't send them. And it's going to cause you to go astray, and you're all going to die. And tell the Kohanim the same thing. Don't listen to these false prophets. Don't listen to them, etc. And then in this argument, this argument continues into chapter 28. Vahi b'shanahi, that very same year, that God tells Yirmiyahu to take these yokes. Remember, if we go back 1 second to 27. What are they doing? Who's he sending them to? To these people. These are emissaries being sent by these kings to Tzidkiel, which means there's a coalition being formed, and they're having a coalition meeting in Jerusalem. All the kings of our neighboring countries, of Edom, Moab, Bnei Ammon, Sidon, basically the whole Middle East, all of our neighbors, are meeting in Yerushalayim, hoping to have Egyptian backing to rebel against the Babylonians, who started taking over the Middle East already. Remember, this is time at Tzidkiel after they've taken over our city. We made an oath to be loyal to Bavel, and now we're going to break the oath and start rebelling against them. And God tells them, don't rebel. Now, because Yirmiyahu says don't rebel, and all the people want to rebel, and they want to join this international coalition against the Babylonians, and that very same year, in the reign of Tzidkiel, in what year? In the 4th year of his reign, in the 5th month, Hananiah ben Azor, the Nabi from Givon, remember, tells Yirmiyahu it's going to be 2 years. Remember, he takes the yoke, and he's going to break the yoke of Yirmiyahu. He says, in 2 years' time, I'm going to bring all the kelim of the Beit HaMikdash back. Again, Bavel's going to fall. I'll bring Yoachin, our king, back. Everything will be great again. And Yirmiyahu tells Hanani, you're a false prophet. And what does Hanani do? Hanani, the Nabi, takes the yoke on Yirmiyahu's neck, and he breaks it. And Hanani tells, in front of all the people, says, in 2 years' time, he's finished. Now, why is this so important? There's all this vibe in Jerusalem that what Bavel's going to fall, because Bavel was only in power for a couple of years. They were a dark horse. And they had this early success, but they're hoping they're going to fall, especially with Egypt's going to come and attack. As we'll see, we saw that last week in Yirmiyahu. Egypt comes out to attack, and there's big hopes in Yerushalayim. And that's when Tzidkiel sends messages to Yirmiyahu, to pray for. Maybe things will get better. We saw that last week. Now, why is that important for our book? We see from here that they're planning a rebellion in year 4, which means most likely the rebellion begins in year 5. And so they're planning year 4, probably breaks out the next year, which fits that historically. And Hanan is saying in 2 years' time, Bavel's going to fall. Now, watch what's amazing. If I take a look at Sefer Yechezkel, it begins in year 5. I'll show you a quick little outline of the book of Yechezkel. Wait, this up here. Chapters 1 through 7 is year 5 of Galut Yoachin, or 5 of Tzidkiel. Chapters 8 through 19 is year 6. Chapters 20 through 23 is year 7. Chapter 24 is year 9, and that's the end of the Nevuot. That's Asar B'Tevet, and that's it for Yechezkel's rebuke of Am Yisrael. The first 24 chapters of Yechezkel is the rebuke of Am Yisrael. Chapters 25 through 32, basically his rebuke of other nations. Okay? And then there's the Nechama, the famous ones with dry bones, and a couple more. 2 chapters there. Then we have Gog and Magog, and then the Pirkei of the Mikdash. That's the book. But if I'm looking for the rebuke of the Jewish people, all the rebuke of Am Yisrael is going to be in the first 24 chapters. And there's another rebuke in chapters 33 and 34, but what that's doing there, we'll probably do that in 2 weeks. Now, the question is going to be, why does Yechezkel begin his rebuke, Tafke, in year 5, and focus all of his rebuke in years 5, 6, and 7? The answer is going to be simple. Because what's happening in years 5, 6, and 7, that's when all the hype is what? Bavel's falling. And everyone's hoping that the exile is coming back. Now, if the false prophets in Jerusalem, led here by Hananiah, are telling everyone publicly, in 2 years' time, Bavel is going to fall, there's also false prophets in Bavel, and everyone's hoping Bavel is going to fall within 2 years. Just as everyone, as all the false prophets are saying, we're coming back within 2 years' time, Bavel's falling, as soon as this rebellion breaks out, what does Yechezkel see? God's chariots leaving Yerushalayim and landing in Bavel. So someone tell me, what's that mean? What's Yechezkel basically saying?
That we're already in Galut. We're headed to Galut.
And more, but what he's countering the false prophets. You understand how simple that is?
If Bavel's going to succeed and the rebellion's going to fail.
Well, yeah. And where all the other rabbis, all the other prophets are saying Bavel's going to fall, and we're all coming back, and therefore don't unpack your suitcases, get ready to go. Did we see last week that remember Yirmiyahu sent a letter to the people in the exile, not to build houses, settle down, etc. And the false prophets send a letter to Yerushalayim saying, how do you let him do these things like that? He's ruining our hopes. Yirmiyahu was saying, give in to Bavel. And the false prophets saying, fight Bavel. And they're promising within 2 years' time they're all coming back. Just when all the false prophets are saying, the king's coming back, and the Kelim of the Beit HaMikdash are coming back, what's Yechezkel see? God himself is leaving the temple and landing where? In Bavel. Now Yechezkel has a job. Before the rebellion breaks out in Yerushalayim against the Babylonians, the future of the Jewish people would have been in Israel. The decision to rebel is going to make all of a sudden the center of the Jewish people now will be in Muncie and not in Jerusalem, because of the right-wing fanatics in Jerusalem. Without getting myself in trouble. In other words, this policy of rebellion. You made a treaty. You made a treaty to be subservient to Bavel. You're breaking that treaty. Yechezkel is going to yell at them for breaking that treaty. We'll see that in chapter 16. It's the decision to rebel against Bavel and break the treaty that God is fed up with Yerushalayim, and now it's only a matter of time. Now, therefore, it's Yechezkel's job to tell the people, keep your hopes down, you're not going back. And God now is not only not going to save Yerushalayim, he's going to move to Bavel, and you're the future of the Jewish people. Now, what's Yechezkel's job? Yechezkel cannot stop the Churban. Yechezkel doesn't affect any people in Yerushalayim. Yechezkel has a different problem. It's called credibility. Okay. Yechezkel sees the writing on the wall that this rebellion is not going to work. The problem is all the false prophets are saying it is going to work. What happens when rabbis, when God's prophets are promising God's going to redeem you, God's going to save you, Bavel's going to fall, and all the prophecies of hope are going to fall apart, and it's not Rishi Smicha Galotenu anymore? Okay. How are the people going to take it? First, they're not going to be happy, but they'll definitely lose their trust in the rabbis and the prophets, probably their faith in God, and then there's a danger they might give up on everything. Because God didn't help them, maybe that'll prove that God doesn't exist, God doesn't help them, maybe if there's some other gods, maybe God broke his covenant, if the temple is destroyed. Because what are the false prophets saying? God's house can't be destroyed because we're God's eternal people. So it's just like we're eternal these people, God's house can't be destroyed. So this whole theology, what's called Churban Shlishi Lo Yeh, I'm saying nowadays, people said Churban Sheni Lo Tiyeh, they said Churban Rishon Lo Tiyeh. Whenever prophets are saying it can't happen, it does happen. And leads to terrible loss of life. So the Yechezkel, seeing the writing on the wall, has to make sure that there can be recovery after the Churban. Now, If Yechezkel waits till after the Khurban and says, I told you so, he can't do that. He can't say, I told you so, if what? If he didn't open his mouth before the Khurban. So listen to the logic. And we'll see this explicitly. Yechezkel's job is to be on record. So he can say, I told you so, after the Khurban. Before the Khurban, no one's listening to him. No one believes him. They think he's crazy. They don't want to listen to him. All the false prophets are against him. Yechezkel needs his credibility to pick up the pieces after the temple is destroyed. So that the people in Bavel can become the future of the Jewish people. But he needs credibility. To open his mouth after the Khurban, what's he have to do? He has to be on record that he said something before the Khurban. But there aren't recorded prophecies back then. I need PR. You know what PR is? I need to make sure everyone knows what I said. And to get an audience, what do you have to do? You got to do crazy things. Lie on your side for a whole year. Not it? Make a model city of Jerusalem. Eat Ezekiel bread. Hello? Come in and say the sky's falling. Come in, I saw the sky falling. Come up with this bombastic nevuot. Start X-rated nevuot, X-rated analogies. Okay? People come to him. They make fun of him. You'll read about it. There's the modern Israeli, if you know Israeli culture. There's a song called Hey Hey Yechezkel. It's a famous song about Yechezkel Navi. He's like this really cool guy, like a hippie kind of guy. Right? Now, there's no other Navi who acts that way. But I have a logical reason why he does it, because he has to be on record. People have to hear him, so that when the Khurban happens, he can open his mouth. And therefore, God's going to give this vision to Yechezkel and tell him one simple thing. Guess what, Yechezkel? No one's going to listen to you. And I know no one's going to listen to you, but you have to say it no matter what. I call him, you're a shul rabbi. Remember I told you? Give a sermon, no one's going to listen to you, but that's why we're paying you. Now, in light of that, all you have to do now is read the first chapter of Yechezkel, the second chapter, and we'll see everything I just told you. He has this vision of, again, what the deeper meaning of all these, that's what you can't doresh, what are these kruvim, what are the ofanim, what everything. You can't do drashot on Perek Aleph of Maseh Merkavah, but you can learn pshat. Pshat is God's leaving Jerusalem and landing in Bavel. And the future of the Jewish people are in Bavel. That's Yirmiyahu chapter 24. Remember the Tenim wrote in Tenim Atavot? The future of the Jewish people are in Bavel. And that's such a mind-boggling prophecy. At that time, it's like somebody saying nowadays, the future of the Jewish people is in Muncie, and what's ever in Jerusalem is a lost cause. They'll call that person crazy today. I'm not saying it's the same thing today. I certainly hope not. But imagine that someone saying that, what kind of audience will get, or what kind of criticism will get. But if he's really true that he's right, then he's got to be on. If he's going to put the pieces together when the Khurban happens, he needs his credibility. So let's see this now in Yechezkel inside, and then we can finish up. So I'm trying to explain why all the Yechezkel's nevuot are in years 2 and 4, years 5, 6, and 7, which coincides with Hananiah's nevuot 2 years it's all falling, which coincides with outside history, where Bavel was having trouble on the eastern front, and moving its army out of our area, moving it back to the east, and dealing with other fronts, and leaving us alone, and hopefully Egypt coming to help us. And there's great hopes that Bavel's going to be gone, but they're going to come back. Remember, that's what God told Yirmiyahu to tell Tzidkiel. Remember, he says, are they really leaving? He says, they left, but they're coming back. I think we saw that last week, I hope. I'm pretty sure. So let's see now, Yechezkel Perek Aleph, where are we? No, Yechezkel Perek Bet. We'll go back to Yechezkel. Here. He has his whole vision of chapter 1, which we can... How's it end? Okay, Kamera Keshet, this is Mari Cohen, comes from here. Kamera Keshet B'toch Hanan, Kamera Nogos Aviv. That's the Merek Kvut Hashem, which is just like what they saw at Har Sinai. I found my face, I hear this God speaking to me. Now, what's God tell him? Listen to God's opening message. Okay? Ben Adam, first stand up. And I'm going to speak to you. And you see, Yechezkel is super passive. God has to stand him up. Okay? Yechezkel doesn't stand up on his own. God forces him to stand up. Okay? And God speaks to him. Ben Adam. Sholech ani otcha el bnei Yisrael el goyim hamordim asher mardu bi hema v'avatam pashu bi ki etzem hayom hazeh. I'm sending you to a rebellious nation, From the time I known them, they've rebelled against me. They and their ancestors transgressed to this very day. And they're, what do you call it? They have a brazen face and a hard lathe that doesn't change. Okay, I'm sending you. Okay, and tell them the following: Kol Mar Hashem, vehema im yishmu v'im yachdalu ki beit meri hema biyadu ki nebeya b'tocham. Right, whether they listen to you or not doesn't make a difference. They're rebellious people, but they need to know one day that there was a navi in their midst. Okay, and therefore, God ben Adam, don't fear them because they'll make fun of you. Okay, and why? Okay. Again, they're going to despise you, etc. Okay, and don't be afraid of what they're telling you because they're afraid of it. Okay, over, he's going to say this over and over again. Whether they listen or not, they're rebellious. Okay, and therefore, Ben Adam, listen what I'm telling you. Take this, what do you call it? Open up your mouth and eat this Megillah he's going to give him. And God gives him this Megillah, okay? And he opens it up. It's written in some strange way. And God tells him to take the Megillah and basically eat it, which is like really, really strange, okay? Okay. So I eat this Megillah, okay? And I open my mouth, and God makes me eat this Megillah. And then eat it instead, and then and taste something sweet, okay? And now here again, V'yomer Ben Adam, almost the same message repeated. Go to the house of Israel and tell them my words. Basically, I'm sending you people. I'm sending you to people who can listen. The nation of Israel, they won't want to listen to you. They don't want to listen to you. They have a hard forehead and a stiff heart. They don't listen. But I'm going to make your forehead stronger than theirs. Okay? And your face stronger than theirs. You'll be like a flintstone that can't break. Don't be afraid of them. Again, here's the same message again. Ben Adam. Everything I'm telling you, make them hear. That's like the fourth time already. Whether they listen or not. And then a wind lifts me up. And I hear after me, Kol Gadol, the famous line we say in Kedusha, which most people have no idea where it's coming from. Okay? And then here's this the voice of the Chayot coming back and forth. And then it takes me, and I come to the Gola in Tel Aviv, on Nahar Kfar, remember Kfar, Rechav, and Kruv, okay? And then I'm quiet for 7 days. After 7 days, remember, he lands there, and this Navi comes, sits there, sits and does nothing for 7 days. And after 7 days, he gives him his message, he gives his opening message about your job is to warn them and give them a chance to do tshuva. Right. Now, this all goes on, and we'll see at the end. I just skipped to chapter 24, and then we'll end here. And the end of chapter 24, we'll just go mamish to the very end. V'ata ben Adam, okay? Hadiyom b'yom kach, this is the very end of this whole unit of the first 24 chapters. And this is the rule of the 10th of Tebet, which is the closing of the unit, okay? With them, when I take away from them their temple, at Muzam, they're talking about what's happening in Yerushalayim, we take away their source of strength, all referring to the temple. When God takes that temple away from them, on that day, a refugee will come from Jerusalem with the news of the destruction. On that day, when the refugee comes and tells you what happened to Jerusalem, as you predicted, the refugee will enable you to open your mouth, and then you can speak, and you don't have to be quiet anymore. Then you'll be their sign, you'll be their wonder, and then then they'll know that I was God. Basically, that's my point, that Yechezkel can't do anything until the Churban's over, but he has to be on record, especially when everyone's hopes that they're going back. Keep your hopes down, you're not going back. You're staying here. And he talks in his visions in these chapters, he talks about what's bad about Jerusalem and why God's destroying the temple. But his main message is that you guys are the future, and again, keep your hopes down about going back, but not so far down that you're going away, and because you guys will recover one day and come back. Now, in light of that, you understand why dry bones is so important. Because the people say we're like dry bones. Remember, death is an irreversible process, and the people are saying we're like dry bones who can't recover. God said these dry bones will come back to life. Because he's talking about the people who think that now the temple is destroyed, it's over, and there's no chance of recovery, like dry bones. He says, no, these dry bones will come back to life, and you'll come back to Israel one day. And later that, we'll see what his vision of the temple is about. So that's my little introduction to Yechezkel. When you see the prakim, you'll see his rebuke, but keep that in mind. You'll see a lot of crazy things he does. Dafka in years 5, 6, and 7 of Tzidkiyahu, and the visions he sees, and how crazy they are, and the things God makes him do, are going to be, in my opinion, to make sure that people get his message. And his function as a Navi will be, after the Korban, to keep Israel together, not to give up hope, and to keep them dedicated to God and ready for the return when the time will come. And again, he has to be on record during those years to make sure that to counter the false prophets, number one, and so that he'll have his credibility afterwards. Okay, any quick questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
Regarding when we hear of the dry bones, it's a messianic prophecy that's supposed to happen at the end of days, and we're really
say that.
And that's what people say, but I'm just saying that's not what it means.
No. When the Nevuah doesn't come true, when Beit Sheni fails, so then all the hopes of Beit Sheni turn to hopes of Beit Shlishi. That's why the people say God's Yechezkel's Mikdash is Beit Shlishi. But he doesn't say his vision of the Mikdash is not an architectural plan. You can't read that in Bill. I think, and lots of things are missing in it. It's all thematic. And when we do that, maybe next week or the week after, we'll talk about how come there's 9 chapters describing the second temple, and all these crazy things about it with crazy details. The key will be when he gives that nevuah is going to be key.
And okay, also
about dry bones, it's true. The theme of dry bones is eternal, meaning what? That we're never dry bones. Our relationship with God is eternal, and the breath will never be over. We might think we're like dry bones, but we'll recover. Tell a Jew 80 years ago, during World War II, that there'll be a Jewish state with a big army and millions of people living there. They think you're crazy. If someone tells you what would be in 100 years from now, 100 years ago, they think you fell off the wall. But things can happen. But it's only because people kept up hope. So you need prophecies of hope, and if they didn't happen in one generation, they happen in a future generation. That'll explain why they put Drew to Isaiah at the end of our Isaiah, because it should have been fulfilled in Beit Sheni, but it wasn't. So it becomes a future hope for a better future, another time. But again, Nevi'im's job is not to predict events; they shape events. So once you understand these Nevuot, not what will happen, but what can happen, it solves all the problems of Nevuot not coming true. That's the famous Kuzari a famous student or live in the Kuzari, that Nevuot are potential and what can be, not what will be, and it's up to us to make them happen.
Thank you.
And also, the destruction you mentioned about the Yirmiyahu's prediction about the destruction of the Jewish community in Egypt, that only happened hundreds of years later.
Yeah, it takes a while to happen.
Like Greek period or something.
That's the question why that, but it's true that the Jewish community, there was a massive Jewish community in Egypt, but ultimately it was all wiped out. But that's a really interesting story. What caused them to be wiped out? They were a little too successful for a change. Yeah. And that pattern repeats itself a lot. It's always good reasons for anti-Semitism. Okay. Right. So next week we'll do some of the chapters inside. We'll talk about when Yechezkel explains everything I just told you. We'll read next week in Yechezkel. We'll see as he has a Disney ride he goes on, what's happening in Yerushalayim, and we'll see a lot of the cool stuff he does. It should be fun. And then we'll see the one that explains. There's one that's very fitting for Pesach, so we'll do also. He talks about Passover. Okay, have a good week, everybody, and hopefully,
Thank you.
Good news. Enjoy the white snow in America. Those are doing. Hopefully, we'll get some rain back this week here. Been a dry February, and we need Pesach to look.
Oh,
I'm not sure what we're hoping for. We're hoping for good news.
Yeah.
We're hoping for a war that will win.
Yeah.
We're hoping to win a war that we won't be fighting. Okay.
Sure, Tov.
Okay. Bye bye.
Okay, bye-bye.